folks, it's Brittany Jackson from Learning Technologies, and today we're going to talk about the workshop feature in Moodle. So here I am in the Moodle playground as normal. Up here I have to turn on editing, so once I click the green button it should turn red, and now I can see that I can edit here. I'm going to scroll down here, probably near the end a little bit because it's getting to be pretty full. And I'm going to click under one of the topics, I'm going to click Add an Activity or Resource. And here we can see, if we scroll down a little bit, we've got the workshop tool. So if we click on that, as always, we have to create a name for the workshop. Here, reviewing. And again, you can put a description and you can display that description on the course page if you wanted. That's up to you. And then under grade settings, we've got grading strategies. So here we've got cumulative grading, comments, number of errors, and rubric. So each of these, as you can see here with a little help guide, so cumulative grading is comments and grade are given regarding specific aspects. Then comments are given regarding specific aspects, but no grade can be given. So they can leave comments, but no grade. And this is the students, because I'll talk more about that in a moment. Number of errors, so comments and a yes or no assessment are given. Did they meet certain criteria? And rubric, a level assessment is given regarding specified criteria. So again, the workshop feature is really great. It is a bit clunky. It can be a little confusing sometimes. So ultimately, it's a great peer reviewing tool though. So you can set it up if you want your students to be peer reviewing papers. This is a good tool to use. Again, it's just a little clunky and there's a few tricks that we have to navigate, and once we do that, it's typically pretty straightforward. So for grade for submission, so this is the maximum grade that can be obtained. So if it's out of 80 points, and then where does it fall? So this would fall under assignments for me in this particular course. And it'll be out of 80 points, so that's the first phase. So they submitted the work, and their peers are grading and saying, yes, they submitted. Now, when they assess their peers' work, then what is the assessment out of? And again, I put them typically in the same category in the course. And then again, you can also change the decimal places in your grade. Under submission settings, here is where I would put information about the instructions you want the students to do. So submit your paper. And here you can choose what type of submissions you can put in there. For submission settings, the instructions, I would be as clear and explicit as possible, just to make that as simple as possible. Back down here to submission types, we've got online text and file attachment. If you want one of those to be required, I would probably do a required file attachment if it's a peer review of a paper. And then maximum number of submission attachments. So can they do multiple submissions or multiple files? Could they attach multiple files? That's up to you. If it's just a paper, probably just one file will do, but if you're doing a whole series of something, there might be a reason to have more than one attachment. You can also limit the type of attachment allowed. So if I click here, I can see if I choose all file types. I can also come down here and choose document files, so Word documents, PDFs, etc., images. So that's all available there to choose from. If you want to limit it so that they can only submit one type of assignment, so in a Word document, they can only submit a Word document. The maximum submission size, I tend to say leave it at the course upload limit. Again, we can't go past 50 megabytes, so be careful about what you're having them submit. And this goes across the board for Moodle. Any submission, if it's a video, it's probably going to be bigger than 50 megs, so you want to have them upload it to YouTube and then share the link with you. They can put it as unlisted if they don't want it to be public. If they put it as private in YouTube, just a reminder, it will not be visible to you, so remind them to make it unlisted if they don't want to share it public. And then late submissions, are you going to allow submissions after the deadline? So this gets a little tricky in the workshop feature. So because you're kind of on a time frame and it's set up by phases, late submissions become a little bit more difficult because once you close the submission phase and move to the assessment phase, it's harder for the students for that to be distributed and do everything. So I tend to say don't allow late submissions in this particular tool. Assessments, what are the assessments? Comment on your peers. So what are the instructions here? And again, make this as clear as possible. And do you want them to assess their own work? You can do that. It's up to you. Maybe you want them to do their work and another person's work so that they're kind of getting that experience through the process. And then feedback, overall feedback mode, enabled and optional or enabled and required, or you can disable it. So for feedback mode, can they not put information into the assessment part, or is it optional that they put in comments specifically? And then can they attach feedback back? So how many files can they attach back? So maybe there's peer-reviewed, their peer's paper that they've edited, and you have an additional document you want them to use when they're doing the peer review. So maybe you want to make sure that that's 2 in that instance. I'm going to put 1, and again, just like before, you can determine what kind of feedback attachment and file type you're expecting. Same with course upload limit is 50 megabytes. And if you want to put in a conclusion to the process, if you wanted to include example submissions, you could do that. Sometimes that's really helpful. So in assessment of example, submission is voluntary, so they don't actually have to do that one, but it's a good kind of practice if they wanted to. You could make it so that it is required that they do that, and you can say that they're available after their own submission and must be assessed before the peer assessment. So there's various options here as well. Availability, so this is slightly different only because you've got 2 different phases here. So here you'd want to open submissions from whatever date you want them to be able to start submitting. And then you're going to put in a submission deadline until the 29th. You can have it automatically switch to the next phase after the submissions deadline. The only thing I would say there is, again, if people are submitting late, you might want to give a little bit of a window here, more so than you would typically. Because again, once you switch that next phase, students can't be submitting from there. And then you can open the assessment form on the 30th and provide a deadline for that where they have to do it by the 31st. So you can update all of that plus time options that are available. So these next 6 options are, again, I leave as default unless you need to restrict access for some reason. So that's the downside, is that you do have to restrict access. So once I hit save and return to course, I can see here I've got my peer reviewing tool, and you know it's a workshop because it's got the little arrows going around. And if I click on it, here I can see that the setup phase is in process, but I can switch to the submission phase. And I would probably say you plan to do these switches manually, again, because of that late criteria. So currently it's in the setup phase, but we don't have really a description, so it's telling us to fix that. So I'm going to put in testing there, and I'm going to put save and return, and let me click back on that again. And now you can see there's green check marks all the way down. So pay attention. If there's red X's, you may want to go in and update things accordingly there. They've submitted things. Now you want to open it and submit it to the submission phase so they can actually submit their documents initially here. It does tell us when they're opening and closing. And the submission phase, you see here this whole list of things. So it tells you when you're providing things, time restrictions, anything like that. You can then also switch to the assessment phase. And if I hit continue now, it gives you all of that information there as well. So again, pay attention to the different check marks here. And then again, the evaluation phase. So you can go in and provide evaluations. So calculating the submission of grades and providing a conclusion. And then you can close the workshop when everything's done. I'm going to go back out to the submission phase here. Mostly because I want to kind of go in as a student in the student role and show you kind of what it looks like there, at least typically. So I want to look at student role here. I'll scroll down to the bottom of the page here. So I am in here as in the student role, and if I scroll down to find that particular workshop, here I can find it right here. It looks similar on their page, at least initially. If I click on peer reviewing, here it looks a little bit similar. So they see the submission phase. They don't have all the information that you have, but they have some of this information that they're going to need. So if there are instructions on submitting their work, they would be listed here. So it says submit your paper and then peer review and others. That's what I put in as that information. If there was an example, they could click on it here and see that. And then here they can add their submission. So just like they would add a paper normally in an assignment field, they can add in their paper here. And then I'm going to go back out, switch it back, and move it to the assessment phase. And here's a little bit different, and I don't know how much you'll be able to really see in this case because there's nobody to assess, right? So here you can see, as a student, I'm seeing the assessment phase. It's my submission, my instructions for the assessment, so comment on your peer. If there's an example, it's there. And then here's where they would see any peers' submissions that they were assigned. Here, there's no assigned submission, so they can't be assessing anything at this moment. And really, that's kind of like the big basics of the workshop tool. This is one where if you really wanted to try and use it, maybe having me come in and work with you a little bit on it, especially for the initial setup, could be beneficial. So feel free to always reach out to us here at Learning Technologies. We are located in the library on the main floor, just before the Clock Tower Cafe. And, as always, happy Moodle!